So part of it is I've been asked to do a TED Talk. So actually the material that you're seeing today, literally got built yesterday on the train up to Edinburgh. And then secondly, it's the first session. This is my first live session of doing this. And it's a 15-minute session which I'm going to be doing around cognitive learning. And part of that is this whole topic for today, which is evolution over revolution. And the reason that I picked this topic is because a lot of people talk about the evolution of the products. And I know my good friend Ray Wong talks about the fact that the iPhone is an example of what it isn't innovation and isn't revolution, because every time a new product comes, they all look exactly the same. So 10 years has passed, and every single one you can see here is pretty much the same form factor, the same shape, the same look. And it's only till literally next month in November, just before my TED Talk, that actually they've changed for the 10th anniversary and actually innovated, and actually there may be a new revolutionary product here, but up to now, the evolution of every year release cycle is still very much that old type of thinking, which we're talking about, well, are we really agile? Can we respond to change? Is there any real innovation that's happened with Apple over the last 10 years? Now, I was in their offices at Infinite Loop last month, and part of it is they're looking at doing machine learning for things like their Apple Care platform, so they can predict when people are going to come into different stores, and then actually be able to get the right parts there based on what they're seeing, people dropping their phones, faults happening on the phones, and predicting things like, let's hope it's not like the Samsung where it explodes. Part of it is they've got to be able to respond to what their customers need. Today, I have to thank Theo for this. That actually about an hour and a half ago, Theo posted, and Theo's a futurist like myself who's based in Edinburgh. He's well known as a CEO and founder of a major AR-based company, and he does a lot in the VR space. And he just literally said today is literally the historical day that the first robot is actually being given citizenship. So this person is now identified as a real person. So this went on live yesterday, and literally it kind of shows you how we're going to be moving forwards and kind of how you test complex systems like this, which is what I'm going to be going through with you today. And I'm going to take a bit of a stop for a second because I wanted to kind of reach out and say, well, does anyone saw this in the news, which was the day before? I try and keep things relevant, so it's all things that have happened over the last 2 days. But has anyone got any idea what these red firestorm areas represent? Anybody?
New virus outbreak.
Yeah, maybe McAfee might be a little bit concerned, but this is around digital adoption. It's also around failing economies and where they're more fragile. And I always like to put in the side of culture. The different cultures adopt these technologies at different rates. And partly what you're going to be seeing, and there's a lot of background videos that I really wanted to kind of bring in, how we talk about things like Industry 4.0, and my old boss spoke about the fact the industrial revolution's just started again for this next generation of smart factories, smart cities. And part of it is this has been evolving over a massive amount of time. The difference is now that the time that change is happening so quickly, we've got less time to respond, as in this particular case, testing community of how do you test these extremely complex systems. And I remember when I was doing the Smart City project in Copenhagen, and we said, how are we possibly going to be able to test billions of movement of people and citizens interacting with their city using mobile phones, using different devices, when we don't have historical data? So we had to generate this information based on using students and crowd testing to go and give us GPX location of people walking and interacting with lampposts and Wi-Fi areas to see how this community would respond in this next generation of platforms. And this, in the same kind of way, part of where we've seen the shift move forwards in the industry is also this is our survival. Everyone's looking at arming themselves with new skills to be able to be relevant still in this industry. And we talked a little bit about the technical side of things, about the fact that people are looking about understanding how to code, learning new skills that are going to be relevant to this new type of realm of testing. So interacting with systems that weren't there 5-10 years ago. The traditional ERP, CRM platforms we're now talking about hugely complex, safety-critical platforms. I talked about some of the stuff that I've been working on in the predictive crime area for out in Australia and also in Washington, DC. These are now hugely complex environments, and you're talking about big data, you're talking about analytics, and you're looking at how you apply machine learning and AI into those contexts. And unless you've got that data science background or you've done some kind of data engineering, how possibly are you going to test? This is an MR platform that recently got prototyped, which is interacting with an entire ecosystem. So each one of these, in theory, is a microservice integrating in and overlaying into a human's kind of platform where they can see safety systems telling them not to step on the road. There's advertisements coming from third parties, each one needs to be tested, whether it's Argos's newest campaign or whatever else it is. This is a whole new world that we're going to be living in and interacting with. And we saw what happened with the Google Glasses. But also, you know, I remember being in Japan quite recently, and the fact that you can actually go, and while you're waiting for the tube system, you can actually order, virtually shop on the walls for what you want. And by the time you get home, it's delivered. So while you're waiting around, you see fresh stock, and you scan it on your phone. There's no footprint of any buildings. This is you doing your shopping while you're commuting home. The way that we do this will change the operational models for these kind of organizations. And I used to work for dunnhumby, heading up their testing. And you know, part of that was how do you predict some of that? For well-known brands like Tesco's, you know, how do you do just-in-time dynamic pricing like Uber, so you're changing the prices of your milk in real time? This is a whole new challenge. And you know, you may be saying, well, actually, this feels like it's a long way in the future. But actually, this kind of technology is here already. You know, I've been involved recently with some Car2X, so the autonomous vehicle stuff, where it's self-driving cars is now a reality. It's not a parlor trick from a Google car that is self-aware and is able to be autonomous in its own right. It's the protocols that interact with the infrastructure to say, how do I get clearance? And I did some work for NAPS, which do all the ping radar information. So it's about interacting with those guys, getting you know, allowing these kind of autonomous vehicles to interact and move around a city. These challenges and being able to test these kind of platforms requires a whole new different way of thinking. Actually, I was on that building which has an infinity pool actually in Singapore. And you know, part of it is this kind of technology and this level of adoption already exists. And you know, what I loved about this next presentation was around Microsoft's vision for this. And we mentioned Alan Page, but also my good friend James Whittaker, which I have to thank him for the t-shirt, which is he's the head of Microsoft Research, and he talks around creativity and how we interact and don't lose that creativity. I know things are going to change. We're still going to interact with each other and collaborate with people dialing in, but the tools are going to change. So how we interact as human beings and that creativity will still be the same, which is what I wanted to talk about today, about the whole evolutionary approach, instead of looking at a new platform to change and revolution, or everyone adopting scaled agile or some other type of methodology that will fix all their problems. It's not a one-size-fits-all. We will still be doing similar tasks in 5 years. And what I love about this is Microsoft's prediction for 2020, which is 3 years away from now, which they released in 2013. And I know, based on the research teams at Microsoft, most of this tech is already there. So in actual fact, the realization of this next generation of platforms is actually coming. So part of what I kind of mentioned there is I wanted to kind of go through and challenge just the idea of how we go about our delivery life cycle. And you know, we've talked a little bit about sequential development, so the traditional engineering background that we both came from in the sense of Siemens, where it was very V-model, waterfall, sequential design. And then now what we've moved into is this iterative approach. So agile, you know, iterating every, 2 weeks. And then there's part of that simple concept of what I'd like to kind of put down as, technology. Maybe I'll duplicate the screen for a second. So, part of what I would normally class as the thinking component, part of what we're seeing in the industry is a lot of this lean UX, lean startup mentality. So part of behind that aspect is around how we go and do this. This could be innovation labs, where we're literally saying, take different teams from different areas, not just testers and developers, infrastructure guys, but people who know the business and the domain, to go and challenge the actual business model, to disrupt the industry, to say, well, what's next? So part of those thinking activity, things like Lean UX has come through to really help us take that and actually look at how we can prove the hypothesis quickly to see if there's an actual reason to do the business. And what I'd say on here is we'd literally look at the making section, which is over here, which I actually think now is called create. This is part of the creativity, the creativity of how people think and then apply that in it. You know, those people could be developers, they could be testers, but they're creative people who apply new ways, whether it's exploratory testing or any other type of tool to that problem, to solve the problem. And you might say, well, actually the next logical place is check. And you know, part of it is think, make, check, a very simple model that's been around for many, many years. But actually, I think this is when we start looking at learning. This is the learn component that actually feeds back to the thinking. And you know, you put up the diagram earlier with the iterative model, and part of it starts off with some requirements. Now, not requirements engineering, but user stories, you know, planning poker, whatever it is that the agile teams are doing. And then it iterates a number of times until you deliver some software out at the end. And then that's the end. It's a packaged object that you throw over the fence to production, and as you said, a year later all the bugs are out of it and you know things are all happy. To me, that's not really the solution. It has to feed back, and this is where DevOps kind of didn't really come into the real world, in the sense of ops was the important part of DevOps, and that was about the measure and monitor and then learning from what real users are doing to then say, do we need to pivot this original requirement to say that actually what we thought, or we're trying to prove with the hypothesis, was wrong. So actually, to me, this valuable component is the feedback loop from the learning and actually the realization of the product going live to feed back into the creative process. Not a retrospective about how we could have done things better, but actually how we validated that what we thought was right from a value-driven delivery perspective is actually correct. Now, my view in this is this could be insight driven, so it could be coming from some kind of machine learning aspect, but you need data to be able to power the machine learning to then apply the algorithms to actually give you some insight into what products we should be selling, what dynamic pricing we should be giving. So you have to provide that insight into the design phase, then from the design phase into the make phase, which we're all very familiar from the test point of aspects, and then the delivery side of things, which is very much in the kind of continuous delivery, continuous operation side of things. He's moving that into this adaptive kind of speed, where there's potentially a whole stack of different methodologies that you could release 26 times a day, or you could release every year. It doesn't really matter, as long as you're able to do that multimodal speed delivery to deliver value into your customers. And then really the last bit is around predicting, which is the feedback loop coming back from learn to actually allow us to make some predictions of how we could do things better. So, you know, part of that is a system or a bot or some kind of AI that allows us to say, to make things better, you could have changed the customer journey to this. The digital experience could have been better in this particular way. And, you know, it could look at what products you're selling and how that your business model, your operational model is actually working, whether or not you're generating the right level of revenue. And, you know, part of what I did with one of the big pizza brands was they decided to go gluten-free. So they decided to take the same model they'd applied very successfully in the States and apply it in the UK market. Now, the problem was, with all the publicity around it, it had the same kind of adoption rates as it had in the US, which was about a 10% increase for the franchisers, which warranted having the additional types of gluten products at each one of the stores. The problem was 6 months down the line, when they weren't advertising gluten-free products and people realized they didn't taste nice, that actually people stopped ordering the gluten-free products, and they was making a massive loss globally within the UK just on gluten products, because no one was buying them. But they had originally, so as far as the marketing guys and the people coming up with the idea, they'd made the success. They'd actually been a digital organization. They'd able to pivot their business model to sell a whole new range of pizzas. But in actual fact, over time, things changed. Culturally, in the UK, we didn't want gluten-free products. So, you know, part of it is you need to be able to pivot your model back to what not selling gluten-free products were. So that could be a rollback in the software. So